Hey guys, what's up? It's Savannah. Welcome back to my channel and welcome back to another true crime video here. Before we get started, if I sound a little different, I'm just going through some really bad allergies right now, which is why I sound like this. So please just try to look past it for this video. It'll be gone by next video, hopefully. Now, for today's video, you guys, we have a crazy, twisted case. This is one of those cases where when I was researching it, I couldn't believe it. I was shocked throughout my entire research, and I know that you guys are also going to be shocked throughout this entire video as well, and I cannot wait to hear your thoughts on it. Today we are talking about the murder of Jerry Michael Williams, who goes by the name Mike, and that's what we will be referring to him as. And with that being said, let's jump right on into it today. Mike Williams was born on October 16th, 1969 in Bradfordville, which is located just a little north of Tallahassee, Florida. He grew up with an older brother named Nick, and his father was a Greyhound bus driver, while his mother Cheryl was a daycare provider. Now, growing up wasn't super easy for Mike. He didn't have the easiest childhood or upbringing. His whole family lived in a trailer, and Mike and his brother Nick were forced to get jobs to help their parents pay their way through high school, where they attended North Florida Christian High School. Now, Mike did great in school. He was student council president, he played football, and he was active in multiple different clubs. Now, in 9th grade is when Mike ended up meeting a young woman, and this young woman's name is Denise Merrill. The two of them immediately started dating and became high school sweethearts. Denise was the cheerleader and Mike was the football player. It's your typical cliche football player, cheerleader, high school sweetheart, and they carried on throughout the rest of high school together and into college. After graduating from high school, Mike went on to attend Florida State University, where he majored in political science and urban planning. He then got a job as a property appraiser, and in 1994, him and Denise ended up getting married. Now, everyone who knew Mike said he was absolutely the hardest worker that they had ever met. He would wake up, go to work, come home, have dinner with his family, continue to work after dinner, and then continue to work even after his wife fell asleep. And this was working out very well for him because Mike was making very good money. He was making about $200,000 a year. And then in 1999, Denise and Mike ended up having their first and only child together. They had a daughter together. Now, Mike loved his daughter more than anything. He was extremely devoted to her. He loved the family unit that him and Denise had made up together, and it was something that he was really proud of. Now, unfortunately, about a year after Mike's daughter was born, his father ended up passing away. And the passing of Mike's father really struck this idea between him and Denise that they wanted to take out a life insurance policy on Mike. And they did this because Mike and Denise decided that if anything were to ever happen to Mike, he wanted Denise to be completely fine and not have to worry about anything on the financial side of things. So when making this life insurance policy, Mike and Denise reached out to a friend of theirs, and this friend is named Brian Winchester. Now, Denise had actually originally known Brian first. However, over time, Brian and Mike had become best friends. So not only was this one of Denise's childhood friends, but now this was also Mike's best friend as well. So they thought this was the perfect person to create this life insurance policy for them, and they made this life insurance policy for $1 million. So for all things considered, Mike and Denise really had a perfect life together. They were living in a really nice house. They had a daughter that they adored. Mike's work was going great. Everything seemed to be perfect in their life. However, as we know, when things seem to be perfect in these types of cases, it's typically the opposite. Now, something that you should also know about Mike is that he loved duck hunting. This was a huge passion for him that he picked up when he was about 15 years old. And something he did very frequently, whether that was with his friends or by himself. He absolutely loved duck hunting. And on December 16th of the year 2000, Mike was planning on going duck hunting this particular morning. December 16th of the year 2000 was a Saturday, and Mike had planned out his Saturday by planning on going duck hunting in the morning. He would start out very early in the morning and would be done a little bit before noon, and then later that night he had plans to celebrate his 6th year wedding anniversary with Denise. So that was his plan for this specific Saturday. So Mike got up, he went out duck hunting. However, when about 12 o'clock p.m., so noon rolled around and Mike still did not come home. Denise got a little worried and she ended up calling her father to tell him that Mike never made it home from duck hunting. And when Denise's father got this phone call, he ended up calling Brian Winchester's father. And you might be asking why, but this is a very tight-knit community. Brian's father absolutely adored Mike. They were all best friends. So Denise's father called Brian's father, and then Brian's father ended up calling Brian. And the three of them decided to go down to where Mike usually would duck hunt to see if they could find him. So they went down to where Mike usually duck hunts, which is a place called Lake Seminole. Lake Seminole is an extremely large reservoir that's 50 miles west of Tallahassee. Mike had gone to this lake many times before. This was not an unusual spot for him, and he never ever had a problem. However, when Denise's father, Brian's father, and Brian got down to the lake and discovered Mike's 1994 Ford Bronco, however, didn't see Mike anywhere, they knew that that was not a good sign. After finding his car, they went over to the lake and started just eyeballing the lake to see if they could find him there. However, they weren't able to do that either. Mike would have been on a boat. Obviously, he was on the lake, so he would have needed to be on the boat. However, no one was able to see Mike or the boat that he was on. Now, this is when the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission was called, and the reason that they were called was because Mike was being reported to them as a missing boater on the lake. So that's why they didn't call the authorities right away, is because these were the people that dealt with missing boaters specifically on this lake. Now, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission started searching that day. However, they had to call off their search pretty quickly that night because there was a storm rolling in, unfortunately, which was the most inconvenient thing to have happened, obviously. However, they couldn't search in those conditions, so they had to call off the search for the night, and then the very next day, they started searching again. When they started searching the very next day, that is when they discovered Mike's boat out on the lake. However, again, Mike was not in his boat. Inside of his boat was Mike's shotgun that still was inside of its case, as well as a couple of hunting decoys and equipment that he would have needed to go duck hunting. Now, once Mike's boat was found, this is when the search really took off. And at first, authorities thought it was a very good possibility that Mike could have drowned. Lake Seminole was known to have tree stumps in it, and some would protrude out of the water, but some wouldn't. And they thought it was very possible that Mike's boat could have hit a tree stump, which would have caused him to fall overboard on the boat and fall into the water and ultimately drown. If this was the case, they were very optimistic that they would discover Mike's body, because victims of drowning usually resurface after about 3 to 7 days. So they thought if he was a victim of drowning, then his body would be recovered shortly, because the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission had said that every person that had gone missing on that lake, whether that was due to drowning or whether they got lost on the lake, they were always recovered. There was never one person who had not been recovered, whether that was dead or alive. They had never dealt with a missing person that they never found. So they were very confident that they would also find Mike. However, after the 3 to 7 days passed and Mike's body still didn't resurface, this is when authorities started to rethink everything. So this is when they brought in a new theory. And their new theory was it possible that Mike was attacked and eaten by alligators? Alligators were known to be in that lake, so if Mike did fall overboard after hitting a stump, is it possible he could have gotten attacked? The answer is yes. However, the fact that there is absolutely no sign of Mike whatsoever is troubling, because alligators do not eat humans whole. If they do attack, they'll rip off an arm or a leg, or there will be some sort of remains from that victim that indicated that there was some sort of attack. If anything, there would at least be a bone or clothing or something. However, in Mike's case, there was absolutely nothing. That was about until 2 weeks into Mike's disappearance, when a fisherman went out on Lake Seminole and actually recovered a pair of hunting waders. Now, if you're unfamiliar with hunting waders, as I was, these are basically waterproof overalls and they have boots attached to them. And there was a pair found floating in the lake. This fisherman then brought these waders to authorities, thinking maybe they could have belonged to Mike. However, when authorities did testing on the waders and searched through them, there was no sign that they were Mike's waders, but there was any indication of an alligator attack. The waders were in perfectly fine condition, and if there was an alligator attack, they would have been ripped to shreds. And along with that, to debunk this whole alligator theory, alligators are not prone to attack in the winter, and this was December. The waters were very cold, and alligators are, like I said, not prone to attack in those types of weather conditions. They typically don't attack in the winter. They don't really eat a lot in the winter. And so because of that reason as well, it's very unlikely that Mike was attacked by an alligator. Now, 6 months after Mike went missing, there was actually a dive team that searched through the lake that Mike had been hunting on, Lake Seminole. And when they did, they found a couple of items. The first thing that they found was Mike's vest, as well as his hunting license and a flashlight of his. Now, you would think when finding these items that Mike more than likely drowned. However, it was the condition that these items were found in that led authorities to question. First of all, Mike's hunting license was completely legible. And if it had been underwater for 6 months, there is absolutely no way that it would be legible, let alone probably even exist. It would have probably disintegrated. And the flashlight that was found also worked, which again didn't make sense to authorities because they thought that if a flashlight had been underwater for 6 months, it more than likely would not turn on when you tried to turn it on. So instead of looking at these items and being like, oh, now this makes sense, Mike drowned and these are all of his belongings, it actually made authorities look at this case in the opposite way, meaning that they now looked at this as it looks like someone planted these items for authorities to find recently to make it appear as if Mike had an accident on the water. Now let's talk about Denise for a moment and where she falls into all of this. Now, friends and family of Denise said that she was absolutely heartbroken when Mike went missing, but she didn't want much media attention on this case, and she actually really just wanted to stay out of the spotlight in general. She didn't want to do interviews. She didn't want to talk to news reporters. She really just wanted to stay back from this. Now, legally in the state of Florida, a person has to be missing for 5 years before they can be declared as dead. Now, when it came to Denise, she actually pushed for Mike's death certificate to become official only 6 months after his disappearance. And that was very strange to a lot of people, including Mike's mother, because having Denise move forward with the death certificate and asking that to become official, why would you want to do that? Why, after only 6 months of your husband going missing and you not knowing what happened to him, why would you want that to happen? Now, another component to this is that Denise did not want this to become a criminal investigation whatsoever. Unlike Mike's mother, Cheryl, who was really pushing for this to become a criminal investigation and was really looking for help in any way that she could, would talk to anyone who would listen about this case, Denise actually threatened Cheryl and told her that if she continued to push this case towards a criminal investigation, and if that were to actually happen, that Denise would not allow Cheryl to see her granddaughter ever again. Again, is a very bizarre threat for a wife whose husband has been missing for 6 months and not knowing what has happened to him. Wouldn't you want some sort of clarity? Wouldn't you want some sort of answers? Why was she so okay with moving on so quickly? It was also said at this point that there was a $1.5 million life insurance policy, a second one on top of the already $1 million one that Denise and Mike had taken out together. There was a $1.5 million life insurance policy. Now, no one really knows if Mike was made aware of this second life insurance policy, even though he did have to sign it. His signature was on it. A lot of people think that it could have possibly been forged. Now, to make things worse, Denise was actually successful in getting this death certificate for Mike after only just several months of him being missing. And when she did, when this death certificate became official, this is when another bomb dropped on this case. And this time it had to do with Denise. It was at this time that it became known that Denise and Mike's best friend, Brian Winchester, were having an affair. And this affair had been going on for years. And not only that, after Mike went missing, Brian and Denise became public with their relationship. They began publicly dating and they even got married. Denise went from living in a house with her high school sweetheart husband and the daughter that they had together to her husband mysteriously going missing and then dating and marrying his best friend and living in the same house with her new husband. Now, how did this even happen? You might be asking. How did we get to this point? How did Brian and Denise get here? Well, according to Brian, on October 13th, 1997, Denise, Brian's ex-wife Kathy, as well as Mike, they had all planned to go on a double date to a concert together. Now, while they were at this concert, Denise and Brian ended up getting out of their cars while their spouses were parking their cars. So Denise and Brian were just walking around and talking, and they finally just kissed for the first time. And you might think that that's a little strange, but Brian also went into further detail about how him and Denise did have a little bit of a fling in high school, and according to him, he said that those feelings never went away. So even though it seems extremely random and out of the blue for them to kiss at this concert, especially when their spouses were there, Brian said it really wasn't that outlandish. Once they kissed at the concert, they then had to, go about the rest of their night and pretend like everything was fine and nothing just happened. But once they got home, they both called each other and talked the entire night and had phone sex. And from there on, it only escalated. Brian and Denise would sneak around with each other when Mike was off at work and would go on work trips. And there was even a time where Denise and Mike went on a trip together and Brian tagged along unknowingly to Mike. This was just between him and Denise. And Denise would sneak off on this trip to go be with Brian. Now, their marriage lasted until about 2012, and that is when they decided to get separated because, according to Denise, she said that Brian had a sex addiction and she just wasn't happy in the marriage anymore, so she decided that she wanted to get a divorce. However, she didn't actually file for a divorce until 2015. Then fast forward to August of 2016, and one day Denise was driving home from her job at Florida State University. She got into her car, and when she got into her car, she was horrifically surprised by Brian, who was already sitting in the backseat of her car waiting for her with a gun. Now, when Denise got into the car, she was already on the phone with her sister, but when Brian made his presence known, he then told Denise to get off the phone and to start driving while pointing this gun at her. Brian was yelling all of these different directions at Denise, and Denise did not follow them. She ended up pulling into a CVS parking lot, and this is when Brian told Denise that he was going to kill himself with the gun that he had in his hand if she was going to go through with this divorce. He said he didn't want to get a divorce, he didn't want to live without her, all of these things. And they were actually able to have a conversation in this CVS, and Denise was able to talk him down. She ended up driving him back to the park where his truck was parked at and basically just let him go. And that's when he got out of his car and went and got in his own car and then pulled up to Denise's car and apologized for what had just happened, said he was so sorry, and asked her not to go to the authorities, which Denise promised that she would not do. However, once Brian drove away, that is the first place that she went to. Brian was arrested on charges of kidnapping, domestic assault, and armed burglary. Brian was held without bond, and in December 2017, he was sentenced to 20 years for the kidnapping and is currently imprisoned at Wakulla Correctional Institution. Now, when Brian was sentenced, there was absolutely no talk about Mike's disappearance, meaning in the trial, there was absolutely no talk about Mike's disappearance, and that was because there had been an agreement that had been made behind the scenes between the prosecution and Brian's defense team. Prosecutors made a deal with Brian in exchange for him to not get a life sentence for the kidnapping charge. But what was it exactly that Brian had to do to hold up his end of the deal? Now, the details of that have never fully been disclosed. However, what we do know is that the very next day after the sentencing, there was a press conference where the Florida Department of Law Enforcement came out and said that they had discovered the remains of Mike Williams. Before we move any further, I just want to take a second and thank our sponsors for today's video.
Let's talk jewelry. Orate is a fine jewelry brand founded by women for women. Pieces range from classic to statement to completely original. Orate makes jewelry you've always wanted but can never find. Orate's gold feels substantial and the diamonds sparkle and shine. Now, because it's all real gold, you can wear it and never have to take it off. You can shower, you can exercise, you can sleep, you can cook. Anything you want, it is jewelry for life. Now, because Orate sells directly to you without the middleman markup, they can offer the same quality as traditional Fifth Avenue brands at a fraction of the cost. Orate was founded on the desire to shake up the jewelry market by offering modern women beautiful designs, amazing quality at affordable prices, and ethically sourced pieces that they can wear every day. Now, I personally love the connection necklace as well as the vintage emerald cut ring. They're both timeless pieces that I know will last me forever. I wear them all the time. They work with any outfit, and I always receive compliments on them. Now, for 15% off your first Orate purchase, go to oratenewyork.com/killer and use promo code KILLER. That's AURATE NewYork.com, oratenewyork.com/killer, and use promo code KILLER. Now, I don't know about you, but over the course of the pandemic, my definition of comfort definitely changed. I traded in my jeans for sweatpants and leggings, and honestly, I cannot even tell you the last time I wore heels. Now, as things slowly approach normal life, one thing I'm bringing with me is comfort. I know I can still be comfortable in a bra thanks to Harper Wilde. Harper Wilde makes bras that put comfort first. Their collection of quality basics includes the Base, which is a lightly lined everyday bra in a range of nudes that won't show through your shirt, and the Bliss. That's a bralette that provides lift while feeling like second skin. My favorite bra is their Base bra. It's an amazing staple to have, as well as their lounge bra. It's a comfortable bralette that you can wear anywhere. Plus, with an easy interactive fit quiz, beautifully priced bundles, and free returns, they've made the act of shopping for bras absolutely painless. You can even get a handy bra recycling kit with your purchase so you can say goodbye to your old bras sustainably. Harper Wilde makes everything about bras better. Stay in your comfort zone. Go to harperwilde.com/killer today so you can get 20% off your first purchase, because the only thing better than a comfortable bra is getting a discount just for being a Killer Instinct listener. That's 20% off at harperwilde.com/killer. harperwilde.com/killer. Now, I'm going to be honest, up until recently, my design experience has been pretty subpar. It's been at a pretty beginner level, and that really was just because of the experience that I lacked and the time that I put into designing. However, now that I found Canva Pro, my designs are next level. Canva Pro is an easy-to-use design platform that has everything you need to design like a pro. Whether you're a professional designer or just getting started, Canva Pro can help boost you and your team's productivity and creativity. It's quick, easy, and affordable to design whatever you need. No matter what you're creating and sharing, Canva Pro has everything you need in one place, including a collection of over 75 million premium photos, videos, audio, and graphics. Plus, Canva Pro comes with time-saving tools that simplify and speed up the creative process. You get all this and more in just one Canva Pro subscription. My personal favorite element of Canva Pro is the Instagram story template feature. It has helped me so much when creating aesthetically pleasing Instagram stories, and they have so many different templates to use from. Anyone can use Canva Pro, whether you guys are in school or starting your own businesses or entrepreneurs or just looking to make invitations. Canva Pro is the perfect place to explore the creative possibilities. Design like a pro with Canva Pro. Right now, you can get a free 45-day extended trial when you use my promo code. Just go to canva.me/killer to get your free 45-day extended trial. That's canva.me/killer. canva.me/killer. Are you the type of person that as soon as you finish one true crime podcast, you're furiously scouring the internet for the next one you can sink your teeth into? Well, if you can relate, then you'll love Wondery's Generation Y podcast. In the Generation Y podcast, hosts and true crime fanatics Justin and Aaron explore hundreds of unsolved murders and conspiracy theories. They'll dig through the evidence, give their takes, and ask the hard questions. Considering everyone here already loves true crime, you are going to love the Generation Y podcast. In one of their latest episodes, Aaron and Justin profile a mysterious death from 2004. Alonzo Brooks was a young black man who went to a party with some friends, but when his friends left the party without him that night, he never returned home the next day. A month later, he was found dead without any clear indication that his death was a result of foul play, but in late July 2020, the FBI classified his manner of death to homicide. Now, what does the FBI know now? You guys, this podcast has been one of my favorites for a while now, and I love it. This case in particular has so many twists and turns, and I was hooked into it the entire time. So if you're ready to kick your true crime obsession into overdrive, subscribe to Wondery's Generation Y podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or listen ad-free by joining Wondery Plus in the Wondery app. Wondery, feel the story.
Mike Williams' remains were discovered at the end of Gardner Road, located in northern Leon County. Now, this was only 5 miles away from where Mike grew up, and they confirmed that it was Mike through DNA testing. His body was found on October 18th, 2017, after a team of search dogs found his remains in piles of dirt. And actually, 98% of Mike's remains were recovered, including some of the clothing items that he was wearing that day. Now, I think it's pretty clear that the reason that Mike's body was ever found to begin with was because there was a confession, and this confession came from Brian. According to Brian, he said, quote, "I went and met Mike at the gas station. I followed him to the lake. We launched the boat. It was just like a hunting trip was going to be." And after his confession on May 8th, 2018, Denise was arrested on charges of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, and accessory after the fact. Denise was 48 years old at the time of her arrest, and at this point, Mike had been gone for about 18 years. Now, Denise pleaded not guilty to all of the charges against her. However, it was when the trial began on September 24th, 2018, that Brian took the stand to testify, and everything came out. According to Brian, he said that about a year and a half into the affair with Denise is when him and Denise started talking about getting rid of each other's spouses. They talked to each other about how they were going to do it, and one idea they had was actually staging a boating accident between both of their spouses. So the plan was that all 4 of them would go out onto the water, and Denise and Brian would essentially kill Mike and Brian's ex-wife Kathy and stage it all as a horrific boating accident, and them 2 being the only survivors. However, it got to a point where Brian said that he realized that killing the mother of his children was just too much. That was crossing the line for him. So he wasn't going to kill Kathy. However, what he was going to do was help Denise in getting rid of Mike. Brian and Denise decided that Brian was going to go out hunting with Mike on the boat, and that Brian would push Mike overboard and make it look like a boating accident because no one else would know that Brian was with Mike since he met up with him at the gas station. They thought that once Brian pushed Mike out of the boat, it was up to Mike whether or not he lived or died at that point. Brian said, quote, "We thought if God wants this to happen, then it's going to happen because it's going to be an accident and he could get out of it." End quote. So basically he's saying, I'm going to push him out of the boat, and if he lives because God wants him to live, but if he dies, then God wants him to die. So it's not really, my fault. According to Brian, he said that he lured Mike out onto the lake and told him to put on his waders. Once Brian saw his opportunity, Brian said he pushed Mike out of the boat, and when Mike came up to the surface, he grabbed onto a tree stump, panicked and confused. This is when Brian said, quote, "I didn't know how to get out of that situation. So I loaded my gun and made 1 or 2 circles around, and I got closer to him, and he was in the water as I passed by, and I shot him in the head." End quote. Brian then had to pull Mike's body out of the water and get it into his car, which is when he drove it to the area that Mike's body was later recovered in 18 years later. After Brian disposed of Mike's body is when he got the phone call from his father saying that Denise's father had called him, telling him that Mike had not made it home from his hunting trip, and that is when Brian met his father and Denise's father on the lake to help search for Mike after he had just murdered him. Now, Brian's ex-wife, Kathy, also testified in this, and she was working with the police before the trial started, and she was on a recorded phone call with Denise, basically telling Denise that she knew what Denise had done to Mike, and each time she brought it up, Denise would just change the subject until ultimately she stopped and asked, "What do you know?" After the trial was all said and done, the jury deliberated for 8 hours before they ended up convicting Denise on all charges. And in February 2019, Denise was sentenced to life in prison. However, in January 2020, Denise actually ended up appealing her conviction, and her attorney argued that there is no evidence, no actual evidence that proves that Denise ever wanted Mike dead. And so in November 2020, her first-degree murder charge was actually reversed. So she didn't get the first-degree murder charge anymore. However, she still has to serve the 30 years for conspiracy to commit murder. And she is currently serving that time at the Florida Women's Reception Center. Personally, in my opinion, I don't think that there's a world that exists where Denise was not involved in this. I think that she knew exactly what she was doing from the very beginning. I think that she saw an opportunity to start a new life with someone that she clearly was in love with, and she knew that she had the money if she got rid of Mike. She had the life insurance policy, and she saw an opportunity to make it look like an accident, and she did it. The whole staying out of the media, threatening Mike's mother, and the death certificate to me just, solidify the fact that Denise was involved in this. Now, one person who never gave up on Mike or finding the answers to what really happened is Mike's mom, Cheryl Williams. Cheryl, from the interviews that I have seen, has to be the sweetest woman on the face of the planet. She fought for her son through and through. She knew that there was no alligator attack. She knew that her son did not drown. She knew that something far more sinister happened to her son, and she did not stop until she got those answers. And that, my friends, is the case of Mike Williams. Let me know what you think in the comments below about this one. This case blows my mind, so I'm really interested to hear what you guys have to say about it. And with that being said, you guys, that's all from me today. Thank you so much for tuning in to another true crime video here on my YouTube channel. If you're new here, hi, my name's Savannah. You should subscribe and join the family. I'll be back in a couple days with a brand new one, and until then, stay safe, guys. Bye.